there was a large bang, and I remember seeing a flash, an orange flash, and then the train ground to a halt and started to fill with smoke, and there was a deafening silence immediately afterwards, and we could hear a trickling on the roof of the train. I now know that that was the debris.
There were a lot of screaming, people praying. I thought, well, this is it. This is where it all ends. I can remember thinking at the time, this is where it all ends, George. You're not going to get out of this. I look back on it that somebody was looking out for me that day, because as it turned out, as I found out later, I was literally 3 or 4 feet away from the bomber, and there were bodies all around me.
I was in the bomb carriage, about 2/3 of the way along. I spent some time wandering around inside the carriage, a bit confused, looking at things. I saw some very injured people, and people who I now realise had died or were about to die, so it was a very difficult time.
It was a huge explosion, a great deal of fear and panic both in myself and everybody around. What I could hear were the cries of human suffering that needed something that I hoped I had, and since I found out that I did have the skills necessary to help people to either end their lives more comfortably or in the most positive way to achieve getting them out of there.
And I remember little things like there was some German grandparents with their grandson, and they'd just come in from Stansted, got on at Liverpool Street Station, and they were standing there with the suitcases totally shocked. And I said to them, this isn't a normal commute into, this isn't how it normally is on the tube.
There was this big bang, and I thought, that's it, it's a bomb. I knew it was a bomb. And there was screaming and shouting, and somebody gave me this seat, which was very nice. And I sat down next to this woman who seemed to be very calm, and I was coughing, and she handed me a clean white man's handkerchief, which I still have, and it's very grey and dirty now. After half an hour, the doors were kicked in by 2 young men. We then heard the screams of the injured and dying people, which in a way was worse than the smoke and not being able to breathe.
I found that I had been wandering around and going back to my own seat every time. I'd spent some time looking at different things in the carriage, then I kept going back to the seat that I'd been in. I somehow felt safe there. Strange feeling, really, and it took some effort to get me out, actually. People had to keep shouting at me to make me pay attention and come out.
We held hands in the dark, and it helped, it brought comfort, and other people around me did that too. And that's an abiding memory, that in the dark we couldn't tell whether you were holding hands with the men or women or what nationality, what race, what they were, but we all did that. We had this moment of kind of trying to look after each other just as frightened humans.
There was a wonderful support with other people of sharing tissues and water and talking to other people, but I think we all were hiding how scared we were.
I do think that the person who stepped on the train at King's Cross is not the same person who climbed out of the wreckage at Edgware Road. The aftermath is deadly. It's almost that what happens at the time, you're numbed at the time, but when that numbness wears off, you get the horror of it comes back.
Any noise startles, and I scream. It's from just going to actually screaming out loud.
Maybe for 2 or 3 years afterwards, I'd sometimes get off a train before my stop because I felt very nervous about being in a crowded carriage, or if I saw someone that I felt uncomfortable about being around. Ironically, people who might even look like myself. I don't carry a bag on the tube because I don't want people to be looking at me in the way I might be looking at some other people.
For me personally, it's not anything that I can ever completely forget. Where I am now in comparison to even a year ago, it's much better. The anxiety attacks are much less sleepless nights, less nightmares, but it hasn't completely gone. I don't think it ever will.
You kind of hesitate to say it was a good experience because I wouldn't want anyone else to go through it, but it's kind of what walked off that train when people intended it to be evil and division. It wasn't that, it was love and friends that are kind of like no others, really. you know, friends that for a very long time the only space that I felt comfortable to be myself was with them.
It's really lovely. There were lots of people who I was bombed with who came to my wedding and who are now celebrating the birth of my baby with me. So there have been some really good things.